You're coming in from. I'm Jen Whitmer, and I help teams and leaders solve conflict, cultivate great communication so work is a joy, people are whole, and organizations flourish. And every week, I do Monday Mentor, and I bring in a guest to talk about their area of expertise and how it relates to you and your leadership. And so today, I am super excited to invite Ben Gioia on. But before we get to Ben and our conversation about leading with a heart, I just wanted to remind you that registration closes on Friday for the Catalyst Retreat. So if you are a woman who is leading in a nonprofit or in a corporate space and you want to you're ready to level up your leadership by digging into alignment, values, your leadership mindset, understanding how your personality impacts your effectiveness as a leader, this retreat is for you. Or if you're in that space where I just need the excitement again, this is a perfect time to get away, dig into those things, and renew. Why do you do this work to begin with, and what's important to you, and have some time to spend working on your own practice that will eventually benefit your team in huge, important ways. So if you are interested in that, please send me a DM. I will give you all the information. But again, registration closes on Friday, June 9th. All right, so today's conversation, I'm so excited to have Ben Gioia on. Ben is a multiple time author, I think 4, maybe 5. I'm trying to remember now. He is a host. He is a trainer. He has so much leadership and corporate experience, but he also helps people tell their story. And he and I are aligned in this way that we talk about being a full human, and that we influence people and we impact people by having the heart of a human. And so I am so excited to invite Ben on. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Jen. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
I'm so happy to have you. So we have actually just recently met and have enjoyed your content and your emails, and we've had some fun exchanges over email because we've both taken some really cool trips this year. But the audience doesn't know you yet. So give us a little bit about who you are and how you got to doing what you're doing today.
Thank you. This is always a fun answer because I never quite know how to tell this story, right? Because, all of our lives, right? So many stories that make up who we are, even when there's one of those big ones or two of those big ones. And, for me, I always wanted to be helpful in the world and make an impact. That was just, embedded from my family. And I got kind of sidetracked in making my impact because I found my way to drugs at some point in my life. I was like, ooh, drugs, wonderful for a little while, about a minute, and then they don't really work so well. So in the sorting out and in the stepping away of that, I had an opportunity to find my way to rock bottom, shall we say, right? What a wonderful place. And what a beautiful place, because we can only look up from rock bottom, right? And I found my way to meditation, first and foremost, which was the first step in I can actually make choices about things in my life, right? And then in and around, the gazillion other things that I can't squeeze in the next 10 seconds, right? Had the opportunity to speak at Stanford University. Somebody had reached out to me on LinkedIn, right? I had published my first book and just changed my business name to Influence with a Heart. Somebody reached out and they're like, hey, do you want to come do this training at Stanford University? I was like, what? Big coup. And I said, sure. And we work out the details, sign the contract. And I said to the event planner, and I had learned this from a coach, I said, hey, I'd love to make the event super special for you, for the guests. I'm going to show up with autographed copies of my brand new book for everyone in the audience and your staff. And she's like, oh my God, that's amazing. It's like 100 books, 130 books. You're welcome. We hang up the phone and I went, oh crap, I have to write that book right now.
Oh my God. Nothing like taking a leap and building the bridge as you go down.
Yeah, right there. So the event that I promised the books for was 6.5 weeks from the promise.
Oh my gosh, I'm breaking out in hives. Okay, it's fine. It's fine. You did this. I don't have to worry about you.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, I did the book in 3, got it produced in the other 3, and showed up, and the event was a success. The event planning company hired me several more times. The audience people hired me to come speak at their headquarters in Sydney, Australia the following year. And I was like, wow, this is cool. This is working. And then in the meanwhile, like before the book was even done, I had put a copy of the book cover, digital copy, up on LinkedIn, right? And somebody reached out and said, hey, we're creating a mindfulness and empathy video game for a Fortune 100 company with MIT for 20,000 employees. Would you like to write the curriculum? And I went, of course I'd like to write the curriculum.
Absolutely, this sounds amazing.
And that turned into almost a year's worth of consulting with a Fortune 100 company. And then, stubborn man that I am, right, 2 years later, I'm sitting there and I went, oh my God, I can teach that, right? I can teach how to write a book quickly, and I can teach people how to leverage the book before it's done to get clients, to make impact, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's the super nutshell for today.
There we go.
Yeah.
Well, there's so many great things about your story, and that and your willingness to be vulnerable about your story, because often we don't like to talk about our failures, especially taboo topics. And so that is, I think, part of what makes a healthy leader is knowing how vulnerability not is used. It's not like a manipulative tool, but like how we connect to people through our failures, and how not to overshare. Like you gave a great, without being like feeling like you have this vulnerability hangover because you've shared all of these details with people that were like, ooh, that's too much, and it almost defeats the purpose. So how do you anyway, sorry, I don't want to ask how yet. I kind of want to start with, so
Sure.
You've said some really great things about leading with influence and leading with your heart, and you can see in your journey how you got there. But can you give us a little bit of like thumbnail definitions of what you think of as influence and how you think about with a heart? Like, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, thank you so much. The influence part is, for me, it's inviting somebody to say yes to something, that's good for them and good for you and good for everybody else.
Yeah.
Right? The win-win-win is what I think influence is, right? As opposed to persuasion, manipulation, those kinds of things,
Yeah.
right? And the with a heart really just speaks to the intention, of the activity, right? I mean, something that, the first time I heard this was the historical Buddha talking about, somebody uses a knife and, somebody uses a knife and somebody dies, right? The doctor trying to save the person, the intention is different than, right, the person who has nefarious ideas.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so that heart part of things is, to me, is really the core of it all, because we can be experts in our stuff, we can bring transformational processes, we can teach things, we can do the coaching, yada yada yada, and who are we being and how are we showing up? Because first and foremost and lastly, that's the stuff that's really the most transformational for the people we serve.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that works. And both of us are solopreneurs, and a lot of the people that I serve are corporate leaders. And I have a previous client from an old consulting place that I worked at. And long story short, he left and was doing other things. But he keeps getting phone calls from other people that have worked with him. It's like, I want to go where you're going. Like, what are you doing? And that is the power of influential leadership, because while he was absolutely a subject matter expert in the industry that they worked in and was incredibly gifted in strategy in that area, but what he was really amazing at and is still really amazing at is developing and caring for people. So much so that influence is, people are like, oh, I want this type of work with this type of person. And I think that's such a powerful piece as a leader. And that comes from, like you were sharing the story about vulnerability. It comes from being willing to find the win-win-win. I've got this great, I'm going to ask you this question because I have this great question on my Instagram DMs that I have some ideas about, but I kind of want to hear yours too. The long story short, her question was, how do you influence people and not be the boss? which I loved this question because she doesn't have the formal leadership title. And I talk about this in a slightly different ways, I think, than you do. But I would just love to hear what you think about that. Especially, I was like, oh, I'm going to ask Ben this question because she's got some discomfort with the idea of being the leader or being the boss, but she wants to have a positive influence. So how do you help people with that?
Yeah. So I think the first part, and there's a lot of layers to this one, right?
Yes.
I think the first part is just to practice knowing and accepting that you are a leader, right? Start with that. And remember that I use the word practice here, right? Because we've got to do it again and again. And sometimes it's terrifying and sometimes, and I want to go vomit or, whatever happens. So that's one part of it. And then, kind of how do you lead without leading, I think is, I'll use those words for a moment. For me, it's having conversations with the people that you're serving, right? Whether it's the team you're leading, the clients you're serving, et cetera, about the thing, that's going on, right? So I often will, not often, all the time, will coach my clients, my book authors in doing this, like have a conversation about the book you're writing with the person you're writing it for. To understand their challenges and goals and dreams and all that kind of stuff, because if they tell you, first of all, you'll know, right? So you can know how to serve and support them. You'll also get the language that they're using to talk about the pains and challenges and goals and stuff, which is amazing because if they hear you using their words, right, they think you know stuff. They're like, oh my God, you get it. And then just the other part is, in the asking of the questions, of the exploring of the challenges and goals and stuff, is just being, a heck of a listener, and then being even a better listener than that. Because if you just, let somebody share, their deepest and darkest with you, so to speak, right? They're gonna love the opportunity to reciprocate that in some way.
There's so many good things about what you said, and I want to pull out 3 of them.
Please.
One is, I talk about it and the idea of, you said recognize that you are a leader, like just kind of own that. And I always talk about that you have to lead yourself first. You have to lead yourself before you can lead anybody else. And my joke is always, I am the hardest one to manage. And so if I'm leading myself, I am the hardest one. Just knowing that, it helps us. I think some of us get a little squidgy about leader because we might have had unhelpful or unhealthy leaders, or we don't like that connotation. There's some other story that's going on there. But if you can come back to that idea of just recognizing that the leader, you're first leading you, and that you are a leader, kind of stepping into that identity is super helpful. And I think the second thing you said was really listening to their challenges, like talking to the people. And if you are working on a corporate team and you've got accounting saying one thing and you only ever listen to accounting, and your creatives are saying one thing, because that's usually where it's happening, or maybe account or whatever, if you only understand part of the problem, you have a limited view, which gives you limited solutions.
Right.
But the biggest part, I just want to underline, highlight, circle, and star, is listen. Be the listener. That is the most powerful leadership skill I think anybody really has. And even the way you said it, listen and then listen more. Because people, I think I am consistently surprised how much when I'm sitting with somebody, they're like, I just feel really heard. And that feels new to them. And that always breaks my heart just a tiny little bit. That they don't feel heard. And so I just love those big 3 things. You're leading, own that, listen to the people around you and what their problems are, because then you can offer fuller solutions. But listen, really hear them in a deep way. It also makes me wonder then, so you've done all that, I'm just kind of curious, what's the now what? How do you start to communicate your message out in the world? You're talking about coaching your book people, giving a podcast. What's the power of that type of in communicating your message in that way?
Yeah, thank you. So for me, I like to help people who are helping people, right? Like amplify the amplifiers, or however you want to say that. So coaching people, in their books is a beautiful way to do that, especially if they have big networks or are associated with, companies that can, certainly move the needle on something. I mean, that's always a lot of fun. And the other part of it is that, book, podcast, even, TV talk show, aka video podcast, things like that, give mere mortals like us, right, the opportunity to influence on a bigger scale, to be perceived on a higher level, right, and to literally reach more people, right? You have a podcast, you're going to reach more people. You have a book, you're going to reach more people. And let me put the brakes on as I say that, because you got to do the strategic stuff right with the podcast and the book, right? And this is where the biggest mistake of all this stuff comes in, right? It's like, hey, I want to be a thought leader. I'm going to do my thing. Okay, I know stuff. Here's my book. And it's like, great. Nobody was asking for that book, and you didn't actually plan a strategy for what you did with the book by time it got on the shelves, right? Kevin Costner, right? Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come. Absolutely not. unless you're like Oprah, right? Or have a big following. And, of course, there's exceptions to everything that I'm saying, but sure. For most of us, right, speakers, coaches, leaders, consultants, small business owners, right? We want to use the book for the positioning. We want to use the book to make an impact in the world. We want to tell our story, share our message, right? We got to do stuff with it. And, I like to say, think of your book or your podcast or whatever that is as a bridge or a stepping stone to what you want to happen. Do you want speaking gigs, right? Do you want clients? Do you want consulting gigs? And use it in service of that, because it's like, do you want to try to sell 20,000 books, which sounds terrible, or do you want to develop relationships with 10 people and get to the same goal much faster, monetarily, impact-wise, etc.?
So what do you tell the person who's like, oh, I'm just, I think it's sometimes easier to connect why an entrepreneur or a speaker, why those of us in that role might write a book. Yeah. But what about that corporate thought leader that's like, oh, I'm just running a smaller business, and like, I have this great message, but I don't know, like that kind of back and forth. What's valuable to them about investing a lot of time and thought into a podcast or a book? Where's the leadership value or the business value for that?
Yeah, thanks. I think there's a whole bunch of things. I mean, there's, legacy after you're dead. There's, there's the living legacy of right now, right? There's an opportunity to take, all the stuff and all the stuff and actually put it into a form that's outside of your brain, right? And, you can, leverage yourself, scale yourself, and, that could be something that helps your team, be able to, express your vision a whole bunch better because you've put it in writing, put it in a book, or, created some kind of thought leadership content, right? I mean, what better way, is there to get somebody on the same page than to help them really understand your stuff, right? And easier said than done. CEOs are busy. I'm busy. I get it, right? And I say to, all of us, remember that these days we can dictate with AI transcription, right? That's a really important part of, the gifts that we have of technology today. So the people, who are like, oh, we're too busy to write a book. It's like, hey, you can speak 1,200 words in 7 minutes. So you're probably not too busy. The important thing is just having the right strategy for it.
That's a good reminder too, and I think that applies to lots of things outside of books. So when I am in helping people think about what are they trying to communicate, interpersonally, role play is a huge part of that. Role play is a huge part of how do I prepare for a hard conversation, to give feedback that might not be well received, all of that. And so because there's so much value of getting it out of your mouth, like just the practice of moving your lips in a certain way so you can say it doesn't feel so weird anymore. There's a physicality to that. But the same thing, but I have to write this thing. So get it transcribed. Say it out loud, because many of us are external thinkers. Yeah. Nobody would ever guess that Jen Whitmer's an external thinker. This verbal processor, get it out. And then my favorite Francis Bacon quote of all times is that man makes a writing exact. And you find so much clarity when you condense it into writing. But starting with the AI, starting with some kind of transcription, it's not cheating. That is wise use of your time.
Yeah.
And then it's still your words and thoughts. And that's such a great reminder as a book author that that's still a way you can communicate your message to get it into that written form.
Beautifully said. Yeah, I like the term messy manuscript. Yeah, just get that stuff done.
They're always messy.
Yes.
Okay, so I just looked at the time, and so we are going to need to wrap it up. You've given us so many great nuggets, and if you were live or watching the replay, I'd love for you to tell us, in the comments what you took away from what Ben was saying. But Ben, tell us where to find you. How do we get with you? Tell us a little bit more about the podcast and the roadmap. Give us the things.
I'm sorry, I have to point in the right direction here. Somewhere near me, there's a QR code. Thank you. Look at her. Fantastic. No, so lots of ways that I'd love to support you in bringing your message to the world, to being the thought leader you are and making the impact you want to make, right? So the most timely of things that Jen was so beautifully pointing to is the podcast and book roadmap coming up. It's June 17th and 18th. It's at podcastandbook.com. It's a free event. It's online, 2 days on the weekend. Reasonable days, right? We're not doing the 14-hour thing. We're not doing like the rah, none of that stuff. Like, we're going to do stuff for the roadmap. And the way we talk about it is, it's a simple way to make a global thought leadership masterpiece in 6 to 9 months, right? So whether you're using a book, a podcast, a TV talk show, whatever that is, to understand how to do those things, how readily available it is to do those things effectively, right? How the playing field is leveled in so many ways for people like us. Like, the doors are open, right? We just got to do it, do the things the right way. And Podcast and Book Roadmap, podcastandbook.com, is a really great way to understand what is possible, because it's amazing. It's so much more accessible than you think. And, we have 4 great speakers that day. Dare I say that about myself? And I think you'll really like it.
That sounds such like a great event, especially, I know I often do most of my things during the week, but it's nice sometimes to have something on the weekend. So that's such a great option. So the 16th and 17th of June.
Oh, I'm sorry, 17th and 18th.
17th and 18th. And yes, the 16th is a Friday.
Yes, thank you.
So right here, you can sign up for that. Then where should we follow you? LinkedIn, Instagram, tell us where to find you.
LinkedIn is great. My last name is spelled Gioia, because just keep throwing vowels at you. LinkedIn is my place, or you can go to my website, influencewithaheart.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here today. You've given us so much to think about and ponder, and just little great nuggets to help us move forward as leaders and influencing those around us, and hopefully more than just those around us.
Exactly.
I appreciate that. Next week, we will be talking with Mary Snyder. She's coming on to talk about nonprofit leadership and sharing your message in that particular arena. She is a fantastic person, and she is a dear personal friend as well. And you will love her and her Alabama spunk, as I like to call it. So we are here at 1 p.m. Eastern every Monday, sharing leadership tips for you. And don't forget, the Catalyst Retreat, if you are interested, the registration closes on the 9th of June. So if you are ready to level up your leadership and have a great team, DM me and we will talk about it. Thank you again, Ben, for being here.
It's a pleasure, Jen. Thanks for everything. This has been great.
Awesome. Bye, everybody.
See ya.